start creating the processes from day one, because profits follow process. All right, I don't know why this is continuing to backtrack on me here. All right, that's where we should be. You know, I love events like this because it puts me in a room with people that speak the same language, but maybe have totally different ideas. And I love that. I love just being able to meet and hear a lot of the different ideas that are represented in this room, a lot of the people that I've already been able to meet last night and today. As Johnny said, my name is Josh Summers, and 4 years ago, I sold my first business for $120,000. Now, to some of you in this room, I recognize that might not be that impressive. I get it, all right? And maybe to a number of you others, this is an attainable goal that maybe you're on your way to attaining, or it's something that you want to maybe set for yourself. For me, at the time, I was ecstatic. My wife and I went out to a nice meal. I bought my wife some cool jewelry. We paid off the mortgage for my first home with the sale of that website. I was excited. And best of all, I was ready to take on the marketing world with my next project. Now let's take a step back for just a moment. You see, I don't regret selling that website. I don't regret it at all. But I do cringe at the idea of how much money I left on the table with that sale. You see, it had only been about 2 months earlier when a trusted friend of mine had come up to me and said, he asked me, he's like, Josh, is this an idea? Is this a passion that you have that you want to keep writing about, that you want to keep creating content about 2, 3, 5 years down the road? The website, by the way, was about guitars. I love to play guitars. Turns out, I hate to write about guitars. So my answer was simply no. I'm like a lot of you entrepreneurs in this room. I scratched that itch of boredom with new ideas. And I had tons of new ideas that I wanted to try out. And this website, it was holding me back. It was taking up my time. So 2 weeks later, I put the website up for sale via a broker. And I got to tell you, it was a disaster. It was a mess. Okay, my financials weren't in order. There was no process in place. There were no automations that I had in place. I just threw it up there because I wanted to get rid of it. And honestly, it's a miracle that any moron decided to purchase that website. But they did. And as it turns out, they weren't the moron. I was. You see, they had bought a valuable asset at a very low multiple because I wasn't ready to sell. I wasn't. Now, my goal here with the time that we have this afternoon is not only convince you that having some sort of exit strategy is worth having, whether you have an established business or whether you're starting from day one right now, but to also give us some really concrete, tangible, practical ways that we can increase the value of our business, whether we decide to list it or not. Now, speaking of listing it, by show of hands, how many people in this room have ever seen the show Love It or List It on HGTV? Anybody? All right. How many people have heard of the show Love It or List It on HGTV? Okay. How many of you in this room are silently judging anyone who raised their hand and said that they watch HGTV? Yeah, that's what I thought. For those of you guys who have never seen this show, the basic premise goes that there's a couple that's split between the idea of upgrading their current home or selling that house and buying something that's nicer, that's an upgraded house, right? And that's where these two hosts come into play. You've got Hillary, who's an interior designer, and you have David, who's a realtor, and they're trying to come in and work their magic. You have Hillary, who's coming into their house and making significant upgrades on that house, trying to make them love that current house. And then you have David, who's showing them around to all these different houses, other neighborhoods, trying to convince them that, ooh, it would be so much nicer if you just got rid of that and you bought a new one. Now, of course, there's been multiple seasons, hundreds of episodes, and I've done the calculations. What do you think the average or the guess is for how many people stay in their house versus those who sell it and buy something new? Any guesses? I'm going to give you the answer right here. The answer is, if it can come through, it doesn't matter. No, I'm serious. The real answer is, it doesn't matter. Seriously, think about it for just a second. Let's say that you make these upgrades on the current house that you have. More often than not, if done right, the upgrades that you make will actually gain a higher value for your house than the investment that you put into it, meaning that you should be able to buy a better house. And likewise, if you decide to stay in that house, not only will you enjoy being able to live in that house, but once you do eventually sell it, you're still going to be able to realize the gains on the investments that you made. So what's my point? It's very simply this. There's probably a lot of us in this room that might be thinking, selling a business? I don't even have a business started yet. Or better yet, there's some of you that are like, sell my business. My business is this, my face. I can't sell this once I get it up and running. And I get it. But bear with me for a second. Let's just put that to the side for a moment. Because building for an exit has little to do with selling. It has everything to do with adding value. All right, now before we continue on and talk about some practical ways that we can add value to our websites, I'm going to put on my buyer's cap, literally my buyer's cap, right? And I want you to see through my eyes for just a moment, through the eyes of a buyer. By the way, we have, Empire Flippers out in the back. If you have questions about what I'm about to tell you, they're going to be able to go even deeper and provide even more information on this. But the average online business right now sells for between 20 and 60x multiple net monthly profits averaged over 12 months. Now we're going to go into exactly what that means in just a moment, but I want to stop and give you one other number. It's the number 595,000, more than 500,000. That is the number of businesses that failed last year. Now, I'm not trying to discourage you. I promise I'm not. The reality is, I want to encourage you. Is there anybody in this room, okay? And raise your hand because I want you to celebrate this. Is there anybody looking back into 2019 that you made a profit? I don't care if it's $1 or $1 million. How many in here made a profit? That is, no, come on. Raise your hand higher. That is something to be proud of, all right? Everybody, give yourselves a round of applause. That's something great. You think about it. You are doing better than Uber. You're doing better than Spotify. You are definitely doing better than WeWork did last year. $1 in profit is better than ours. Honestly, guys, I don't care if my neighbor has $1 million mansion. If he is leveraged up to $999,000, that doesn't impress me. What impresses me is profits, and you guys have that. So if you can look back over 2019 and think about your profits, okay? Your total net profit for the last year, that's your revenue minus your expenses. And for the sake of this exercise right here, I want you to not count any money that you paid for yourself or that you took out as an owner drawing. All right, that's your total net profit. I want you either in your head or if you want to write that down, what was your net profit for 2019? And then I want you to go ahead and divide that by 12. And that's where we get the net monthly profits averaged over 12 months. And the reason why we do this, going back to the website that I sold in the beginning, I always had a spike in November and December during the holiday season. So if I sold in December, that website looks really good. If I sold in May, it looks really bad. So by averaging it out, we get a more clear picture of how the business is doing. Now, in this case, it averaged out to $4,000 a month over the course of the entire year. And so when you multiply that by the average multiple of 30, that's where you come up with $120,000. So you can do that for yourself right now. Your total net profit divided by 12 months, multiplied by 30, that is theoretically what I, as a buyer, would be willing to pay for your business. Now I want you to take a moment and look at this equation. What are the numbers that we, as business owners, have the ability to influence? Obviously, we can't change how many months there are in the year. So we're left with the left side, the profits, and the right side, the multiple. And I would venture to guess that most of us in this room spend the majority of our time maximizing profits and trying to find new revenue streams. And rightly so. That's what we should be doing as business owners. But what if I were to tell you that it's relatively easier, not easy, but relatively easier to increase the right side of that equation from 30 to 35 or 40 or even 45. In the case of my business, I call that messing with the multiple, all right? And in the case of my business, that was the 30X brought me to 120,000 for that particular business. If I had been able to get that even up to 40, and I told you, it was a mess. It was a complete mess. If I had been preparing for that sale a whole lot earlier, or if I spent more time preparing for it, I am fully convinced that I could have gotten 40X, and that would have been an extra $40,000. And when you start adding, don't worry about the numbers here if you think that's low or high. Think about it this way, that's an extra 33% of added value without any extra revenue at all. So this is what we're going to be talking about, what I'm going to share with you over the rest of the course of this talk here. And I, as a buyer, I'm looking at a couple things in order to justify a higher multiple. I want to know, do you have a strong history of profits? In other words, not just 6 months or 12 months, do you have 18, 24, or even 36 of either strong or growing profits? All right? Do you have an active email list or a community or even a customer base that I, as a buyer, could communicate with or upsell to? Do you have staff or contractors, people that already know what they're doing that I don't have to train? And do you have a diversity of income and traffic? I know this isn't possible for all the businesses that are represented here, but personally, I don't want all of my income coming from Amazon. I do not want all of my traffic coming from Google. Now, you can make a successful business like that, but you can make a much stronger business by diversifying your income and diversifying your traffic sources. And finally, what I want to know as a buyer is how much time is it going to require me to set up and run and grow this business, okay? Now, I told you I've purchased website, I've sold many websites since then. I've learned a lot of lessons. And right now I have a few that I am continuing this process with. I may sell them, I may not, but I am preparing for that because I hated being caught off guard and selling one that I wasn't ready to sell. So I'm going to walk you through some of the things that I've been doing. Maybe this applies to you, some cases it might not, but what I want you to do is I want you to think through the lens of your own business and see how you can apply this in your own businesses. The first thing that I'm doing is I am creating processes. I believe that profits follow process. If it'll go there. I'm a firm believer in processes. I mean, I bootstrapped my business just like pretty much everybody here in this room. I was the one who did the research. I was the one who did the development. I was the one who did the copywriting. I was the one who did the sales. I was the one who did the design, as scary as that is. I was the one who did all the follow-up. And as I became better and better at each point along this content supply chain, my ego started melting together with my process. I'd find myself saying things like, God, I need to hire somebody, but nobody can do this like I can do it. Nobody knows how to do it as well as I do right here. Has anybody else found themselves saying that before? Now, for established businesses, sometimes that happens, or at least it has happened for me because I had a bad hire. And I've had to go in and fix a mistake and messes up that they've had to do and just thrown up my hands and said, that was stupid. Why am I going to hire somebody? But for a majority of us, I think that we tend to overestimate our value in the process. Now, don't get me wrong. You are the most valuable part of your business. You are definitely the most valuable part of your business. But you can and you should be documenting your processes. Let me show you what that looks like for me. For me, that looks like standard operating procedures. I'm showing you one, just the first page of one of mine. I go through, and over the past year, I have documented meticulously every single step along the way in my business. All right? Whether that's keyword research, content creation, creating a writer's brief, all of these things. It's called an SOP. And within this SOP, I not only have screenshots, I not only write down point by point exactly what I'm doing. Sometimes I have videos, I have walkthroughs, I have workflows, I have checklists. The tools that I use to do this include Google Docs, which is where I host it. I use Loom, if any of you could use that. It's a great screen capture program. I use Trello. I've just, in the past 6 months, started using Notion, and I really enjoy Notion. All of these tools have helped me to capture the process of what I'm trying to do. And it's something that, of course, as a business owner, the reason that this benefits me is because the more that I capture that process, the less likely I am to forget it. And I think we don't realize how much that we forget along the process. But even more important than that, once you do decide to hire a contractor or hire your first employee or hire a VA, Do you know how much easier it's going to be to bring them up to speed, to train them, if you've got SOPs that kind of go along the way? And you can say, oh, by the way, you're just doing this portion of it. Here's the SOP for it. So valuable. And of course, businesses don't come with owner's manuals. So if you do end up selling this down the road, I can promise you that any owner is going to look at those SOPs and think, wow, that sets you apart from the rest of the people that are on the marketplace. Now, of course, these processes naturally flow into building automation, which is the second part of what I'm doing. I want you guys to take a moment right now and think to yourselves, what is one thing over the past week, the past month, or maybe you're doing project-based things, like those tedious things that you do over and over and over again? Can you think of anything? Don't have to say it out loud, but just think for a moment. Is there any possible way that you could automate part or all of that process? I believe that repetitive activities require automation. And for me, it looks a little something like this. I'll give you a couple examples. I get a number of emails every month, every day. I get tons of emails every day, and I pride myself in the fact that I try to respond to as many emails as I can. But I found myself writing the same emails over and over, right? Have you seen this resource? Have you purchased my book? Would you please review my book? Yes, I have advertising packages. No, I don't want to have anything to do with your guest post. And I would have to write these over and over again until a friend put me on to what I think used to be called canned responses, and now Google calls it templates. And I would take these that I would write over and over again and upload it as a template into Gmail. And now an email that would take me 3 to 5 minutes to write, I now just pop in less than 30 seconds. And it's sped up the time that I've been able to go through my emails. Likewise, I found myself on the hamster wheel of newsletters. Email newsletters. Every week I gotta go in and send another newsletter so that I can get more traffic, get more sales. Now, for any of you guys that have an email newsletter, what I'm about to say probably won't be a huge revelation, but I started by doing a little bit more automation. I built out a welcome sequence, okay? Now, hopefully, if you have an email list, you have a welcome sequence. That's a series of emails that kind of introduces your brand to this new person so that when they're primed and ready to hear more from you and hear from your sales. But I went a step further and decided that I was really sick and tired of writing emails every single week. And I noticed that one of the emails I was writing for my weekly newsletters, it could have been sent today, it could have been sent tomorrow, it could have been sent next year. There's something I called an evergreen newsletter now, where it really isn't time sensitive. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to look back in my archive, grab 52 of my evergreen newsletters, edit them a little bit to make it a little bit better, and then turn that into a 52-week sequence of emails. So now I have an automated evergreen newsletter that follows my automated evergreen welcome sequence. So that every day I'm sending hundreds of emails, generating traffic, generating sales, and I'm rarely logging into my email inbox or my email client. This is something that I highly recommend, that you try to find ways that you can automate what you're doing. Other ideas for this include using Zapier to take maybe an email that you would normally get and input it as a to-do in Trello. If there's any YouTubers in here, you can use Rev to automatically caption. You don't have to do a thing. They automatically caption your videos the moment you start uploading them. It takes 30 minutes to an hour, but still, it's automatic. You don't have to do anything. If this, then that. You can take something that you've posted on Instagram and automatically post it on Facebook or on Twitter. These minutes of time, they add up to be hours that you can be spending growing your business. And of course, as a buyer, the benefit here is that an automated business or any type of automation is great, especially if we're dealing with any sort of sales automated funnel. This next thing that I want to talk about is something that's near and dear to me, because when I sold that website that I told you about at the beginning, I told you my finances were a mess. I had everything going into my personal account. All of my, Amazon Associates, Google Ads, like everything was going into my personal account. And all of the various websites that I had were also going into that account. So in order to prove the value of that website, I had to dig. I think it took me over a week to dig through and try to figure out, well, was that payment for this website or was that payment for that website? I mean, did that payment include both this website and that website? was that just something my mom sent me? I can't remember. Like all of these things going through my head as I'm digging through my finances, and it was terrible. I'm completely convinced that clearer financials provide a very good path to clearer profitability. For me, or actually for you guys, as you're thinking through this, one of the first things I can say is if right now you have all of your business expenses, all of your business income coming into your personal bank account, please stop. All right? I don't care if it's another business account. I don't care if it's just another personal checking account. Separate those out. It'll make your life so much easier, even if you don't ever sell your website or sell your business. Separate those out. If you may end up with 5. I've been reading this book called Profit First. Anybody read this book before? Wow. I highly recommend. And as a matter of fact, I really enjoyed the audiobook here. You'll find yourself with 5 business accounts after reading this book, but it's just a really good way by Mike Michalowicz to think about your business and profit first. But the second way that I noticed myself, and I've seen other people as well, kind of mess up a little bit with their finances, is they haven't been tracking their sales very well. I didn't, at least. I mean, I knew that Amazon sent me a check. I knew that Google sent me a check. I knew that all these different platforms sent me a check, but I didn't really know where. And unless you're intentionally tracking, it is so difficult to go back and prove where that sale came from. So for those of us that have different channels that we're either sending ads to or getting sales from, it really makes it hard to go back and prove all of that. Amazon Associates makes it a little bit easier, right? If you have, let's say you've got one brand and it's got a YouTube channel and it's got a website. Now, right now you could just have one Amazon Associates ID. I would recommend you have 2, one for your YouTube and one for your website. That way you can track how much of my sales are actually coming from YouTube versus how many are coming from my website. Google AdSense does this for us as well. You can create channels to determine exactly where all this came from. But I'm going to use affiliate sales because that's what I'm most familiar with. A lot of people who do affiliate sales don't really realize that there's something called a source ID code, where you can take and add your own ID to any link that you're adding. And I have taken this, I don't know if you'd consider this extreme, I actually take 2 data points and I put it on every single link that I create. One tells me exactly which brand I'm creating that link for. I've got a little, 3 letters that tell me which brand. And then on the right side, it tells me exactly which video or exactly which article that sale came from. So a week later, a month, a quarter, every year, I can look back and I can see exactly how much one video made for me, or I can see exactly how much one article made for me that has that affiliate link. Now, obviously, you can do this with Source ID. You could also do this a more rudimentary way using Pretty Link, where I literally do this. I have a different Pretty Link for every article, even if it's the same affiliate link for me, because I want to know how many clicks came from that article. And by the way, just so you guys know, there's a typo there. That's not supposed to be World Mads. That's supposed to be Safety Wing, because they're the sponsors of this conference as an insurance provider. So what does that mean for me? I'm going to pull back from there. Sorry. What does this mean for me? Obviously, if you're selling, it's good to be able to figure out exactly how much your business is worth. But let's say there's something more valuable in the analytics. Because when I did this a year and a half ago for one of my websites, I found that there was a particular type of article that was doing really well for some reason. Google liked it, it converted well, and I decided for myself, I can see based on the data that most of my sales are coming from this type of article. So I'm going to replicate that. I'm just going to do it for different topics, right? But I'm going to replicate that same thing. And so I turned it started the year at $6,000 a month in affiliate revenue to something that was $17,000 a month in affiliate revenue. And that was just one of my affiliate advertisers. Imagine if you can do this, being able to see back clearly where your income is coming from gives you so much clearer path on where you can head. And of course, that leads then to the next thing that a lot of us have to deal with, and that's stale content. We all have stale content. Whether you're doing e-commerce, whether you're doing content marketing, whether you're doing anything, it just becomes old after time. And one of the things that I've decided to do with my team is to say, no, we're going to go back and make it a part of our editorial process to update this content. And it's not just this one-time thing. It's something that we do regularly because I believe that you need to refresh to stay relevant. On each of my websites, we have at least one and sometimes up to 3 pieces of content that we're going back and we're updating. And I even have an SOP for that, by the way, so that my team knows exactly what I want them to do. And one of the things, obviously, we want to update that old content. We want to make sure that it's still relevant for today. I want to make sure that the links are still working, that I'm not mentioning something that happened 3 years ago and then saying last year. I want to go through and put in new internal links. Because more often than not, what we end up doing is we link back into our archive, but rarely do we go into our archive and link forward into something that we've done more recently. And obviously, Matt can tell you, there's tons of people in this room that can tell you that's a valuable part of SEO is going back and linking forward into other things that you have in your future. And also, I want to take into account changes in SEO. A good example of this from this last year for me would be schema, structured data. That's something that 3 years ago, that wasn't even a word that was in my vocabulary. And now it's something that's coming up over and over and over again, dealing with schema. Now, obviously, there's a debate about whether or not that type of stuff takes away or adds to our traffic. But for me personally, I've seen a 230% increase in the articles that do end up getting a rich snippet because I'm usually ranked lower on those pages and I get to jump up above the #1 rankings. So that's updating and refreshing old content, and that can give us more traffic, it can get us more sales, it can get us more exposure on our old content, and it can also help us continue to build an audience. And that's the last point I want to talk to you about right here. Organic sales, organic traffic, it's great, but I want to know if you're building an audience. Again, coming from the perspective of a buyer, are you building your audience or are you just renting it from another platform? Now, don't hear me wrong, I'm not downplaying social media, Facebook and all that, but I will say this, I do not care how many people that are following you on Instagram. I do not care how many likes you have on Facebook or how many subscribers you have on YouTube. You know why? Because I've bought them all. I know how easy it is to buy all that. I want to know if you have engagement, but more than that, I want to know, do you own your audience? Not are you renting your audience? Do you own your audience? For the beginners in this room, a lot of that means email, okay? And that doesn't necessarily mean for info products either. Let's take, for example, I sell a couple books on Amazon. They're travel-related books. My expertise has to do with China, obviously. But these books right here are on a platform that notoriously does not give us information on our customers, right? And so within those books, I offer content upgrades where I say, hey, listen, just go to this URL. You can get free high-resolution downloads. You can get access to a Facebook group of like-minded travelers who can answer questions for you, things that are legitimately beneficial to them. You just got to give me your email address. And I have a high conversion rate for that, such to the point that they give me their email address. I send them, obviously, the first email, all these things that I've promised. A day or two later, I send them another automated email that says, hey, has this been useful for you? Do you have any particular questions? And sometimes we'll have a back and forth. And then 2 weeks later, I hit them an email with my puppy face that says, I'm an independent author. And the only way I can compete with people like Lonely Planet and Photos is if you leave a review. And that is one of the ways that, again, don't worry about numbers here because within this niche, that's huge, all right? 16, or what is it, 15, it's now up to 70 something now. But I've been able to cultivate that audience because now I own them. If I just let Amazon have them, I'm up to the whim of them just offering, at the end, once they get to the end of a book, to say, hey, did you like this book? Here, review it. For those of you who are a little more advanced in this room, I've got one word for you. Segmentation. Segmentation is huge. For my China website, I start off with 3 particular segments. Those people that are traveling to China, those people who are moving to China, and those people who are just interested in China. They just landed on some of the stuff that I had. And I segment them based on the types of lead magnets that they would download from me. And if you don't know what a lead magnet is, it's that PDF or whatever it is that you offer to people in exchange for their email address. And then even within my email sequence, I have link triggers that go further into segmentation. And based on where they find themselves within segmentation, I have a very specific welcome sequence for them that speaks to their situation and speaks their language. And it's been proven time again. I don't have numbers for you here, but the greater you segment, the higher your conversion rates. So we want to create processes. I don't care if you have an established business. As a matter of fact, it's even harder to do this with an established business because you already have all this history of stuff that you've been doing, and it's hard to go back and do it all. But you want to, even if I remember seeing how many hands in this room came up that are wanting to maybe start something new, start creating the processes from day one, because profits follow process. Build in that automation as you start to understand what you don't have to do, what you can automate, because repetitive activities require automation. Clean up your finances because that'll give you a clearer path to profitability. Refresh your content to stay relevant. And of course, build and cultivate your tribe because I want to know, do you own your audience or not? Guys, spend that time in your house now upgrading it. Making the kitchen exactly the way you like it. Putting in that new wall or that new fresh coat of paint on your business. Maybe you'll just sit here and you'll enjoy it. Maybe your business will be more streamlined. Hopefully, it will have a lot more profits. Or maybe down the road, you'll decide that you want to sell that business. And trust me, you'll be a lot more prepared than I was when I first sold mine. You can love it. You can list it. It's completely up to you. But the worst thing that you can do is to do absolutely nothing at all to prepare for it. Thank you guys for your time.
Hi. So I've got two questions. Is there a checklist that you have where people can go through? Like, say I want to prepare my business for sale, and I want to think like 12 months ahead, and there's several things that you said in your talk. Do you have like a checklist or a site somewhere where I could go through that?
I would wonder if maybe Empire Flippers has some sort of checklist. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. You can connect with me and I can tell you some of the things that I did. I haven't created a checklist for myself, if that's what you're asking.
Okay, cool. If you want, I could do that so we can talk about that as well. The other question was, you talked about email sequences. Have you found like an ideal time between where you give them what you promised, asking them if it was helpful, and then you said there was a bit of engagement? Sometimes if I get an email, it happens a lot of the time, I buy a product, then I'll get an email like a week later, was it helpful, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes I reply, sometimes I don't. But if it's left too long, I've already moved on. So what kind of time frame do you leave before they go cold?
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably maybe even email experts in this room that could answer this better than I could. I know for myself, it's been great to send an email the exact same day. So I send an automatic, like immediate email that gives them what I promised. I want them to have immediate access. And I do that through the email. I don't do that. I don't automatically send them to it as a thank you page. And part of that is because I do want that double opt-in. I want them to click that link that brings them to it. But then I'll follow up. Usually I'll set it to about an hour or 2 hours later with just a follow-up that uses their first name and just says, hey, this is Josh. I'm following up. Did you get it? If you have any questions, let me know.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, hello? Yeah, thanks for the really nice talk. It was really nice presentation. I have a question regarding like sales tracking, because you said you have to keep your finances in shape, and for us it's always a little bit tricky like to know where the sales are really coming from, because as you said, you can have multiple channels, and usually people use multiple channels. So they click an ad on Facebook, they see some ad on Google Ads, they read your blog, and then they convert, and then my question is like, where do you attribute your sale? And then do you say, is it the first contact, is it the last contact, or do you do more kind of a thorough analysis?
Yeah, if you can't track it from the back end coming in, there are ways, if you're able to grow that audience, to then ask them, how did you hear about us? I was surprised. I actually ran an email survey to my list to just kind of ask them a lot of those questions. And I was surprised.
You got a lot of feedback?
I did. People, well, you got to keep in mind, if you cultivate that audience, then a lot of times, if you do it well, they actually want to, I mean, I've got people that email me every week, and I'm just kind of like, yeah, thanks, it's great to hear from you too. But when you cultivate that, then when I sent that out and said, hey guys, I just want to get a little feedback from you, they were more than happy to provide that. And at least you can get a snapshot. Maybe you can't track every single one, but if you can get a snapshot, it'll be a lot better than having nothing at all.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, George. Thank you for the great talk. I would like to ask if you are using any marketing automation platform, CRM, or just email marketing?
Right now, I'm using my email marketing. I use ConvertKit, and they act as my CRM. Okay. I go back and forth, but I tend to want to keep it as simple as possible. I don't want to complicate things too much. I also don't have tons of products, so I think each situation might be different.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Josh. Ooh.
Jesse.
That was a phenomenal presentation.
Thank you, sir.
I got a lot out of it. I don't have a question per se, but I just want to, I guess...
You want to give me a hug?
I want to... later. But in the last year, I productized my services, and everything that you mentioned, I wish I'd had a year ago, because that is such valuable advice. And we were able to go from like a small team to 20 plus writers on the team.
Yeah.
Before, I was doing everything from project management. I was able to take on a project manager, but it's only because I sat down and took that genius from my brain of how I do things into SOPs.
Yeah.
And then bringing on people, and then now our processes make the business so much more streamlined, more profitable, and yeah, I wish I'd had your presentation before, so thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no,
Yeah,
exactly
amazing.
right. For any of you who are business owners, if you've ever been through the process, and I have had this happen to me, where you hire somebody, you spend 2 weeks training them, and this happened, a week later they quit on me. And I was like, crap. I didn't record any of that, and I'm gonna have to go through that whole thing over again. You do that one time, and then, yeah, Jesse is in the same boat where you're just like, I can't do that. I gotta set this up as very structured SOPs and videos that walk through all this. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Shea. I help entrepreneurs with addictions and help people with 23andMe syndrome.
Wow,
and I'm trying to automate and scale, and I'm running into the exact problem of training. And you mentioned using Google Docs, Loom, Trello, and Notion.
Yes.
Can you give a bit more detail on how you stitch all those together?
Yes.
As well as how you present the training documents in a way that itself is scalable, that you have a way that all of your team, all of the people that work for you can become self-sufficient instead of asking you for every little picayune little training video is?
That's a great question. We have, first we're starting right now with Notion as kind of that's the go-to place. That's Notion. So, man, how would I describe Notion? I've called it a project management platform, but people have scolded me for saying that. It's just basically an information organizational platform for me. So I can take, and for my team that does design, I've got wiki, within that design page, I've got a wiki that shows, all right, here's all our logos. Now, it's not hosted on there. I host it on Google Drive, but it's all labeled and it's all put into Notion so that people know exactly when and how they should use that. And then I use Google Docs then to literally write it out. Loom can be embedded in those Google Docs where I'm showing a lot of what I'm actually saying. Sometimes it's embedded directly into Notion. And then Trello is just something, I'm actually somewhat moving away from that, but it gives a lot of a really good visual representation of what we're doing. All right, first we're doing this. Here's all the things that we need to do it for. And then once you're ready, you move it into the next stage, and then you move it into the next stage. And you can set those up, and it's very visual, a lot easier for somebody to use and know, okay, now I'm on to this next step. Does that make sense?